Today, I'd like to discuss the comments on my last video. They were very, very good, and a lot of great questions and a lot of great comments. And obviously, not everybody agrees, which is, that's what makes a market, okay? But someone on Twitter, so I film or record on TikTok, then I put it on Twitter, and I put it on YouTube. This is new for me, okay? But someone asked a very interesting question on the Twitter, and here's how I responded to it. The question, I'm not going to say what his name is, was what's the big disconnect between the talk of de-dollarization and the fact is that the dollar is trading at all-time highs with 88%. And this 88% says that if there was a currency transaction in any currency in the world, 88% of the time, the dollar was on the other side of the trade. Now, this is not talking about a high percent of trades that dollars on both sides of the trade. And we're not talking about the value, what percent of the value of all trades are in the dollar, or the volume of all trades are in the dollar. All these things are incredibly high. The dollar is the dominant world currency no matter what we want, okay? So this is not about the dollar. This is about SWIFT. SWIFT is the financial messaging system that the global financial world uses, which is owned by the U.S. and other allies around the world. And this SWIFT system is dominated in dollars, okay? And this is how we sanction people, all right? Because we control that, we can then control their banks and we can hurt you and we can put sanctions on you. And where they love using the dollar and trust the dollar, and it's all the reserves and everything, guess what? They hate SWIFT. They hate it because we can put them under sanctions. Now, I'm not here to determine if the sanctions are good or bad, or we should agree with them or disagree with them. That's not the point. The point is that we can put the sanctions on you, and they don't like that, which I totally understand, okay? So there is a study that came out on Friday, or at least I saw it on Friday, called China's Dollar Dilemma. And China is increasingly afraid that in the future, they could be sanctioned like Russia, and they don't want that at all, okay? And so they too are looking for ways that they can set up alternative payment systems outside of SWIFT that they can pay people in. The problem is once you leave SWIFT, then there's no way for you to even really pay with your dollars. So as we've seen in the last 2 months, the two major cases, which was decided by countries outside of SWIFT, was they decided on barter, okay? And that's their issue. But let's take a look at China here for a second. Now, this article, or this study, I will post into the comments so you can read it yourself. It's not that hard, but it's intricate. The financial world, global financial world, is very complex, and there's multiple ways that countries are touched by their currency, other currency, world currencies, okay, and the global and the U.S. dollar. So when you look here, they say that the Chinese banking sector reportedly has 418 billion in cross-border dollar liabilities, all right? And then they also are worries associated with LGFV's onshore and offshore debts, which together were reported at 8.5 trillion in 2023, and this is a major concern to the Chinese authorities. Not only that, China's 4 largest banks, which are the 4 largest banks in the world by asset side, are also interconnected with the dollar financial system. And how's that? Well, guess what? They have approximately 460 billion that they keep as their dollar assets, all right? So they have 460 billion, 60 billion in liabilities, 410 billion in dollar assets. But for the U.S., this also causes issues for us, all right? Um, when we're sanctioning Russia, all right, so what we do is the SWIFT system, which is the global banking system, we monitor the big banks that trade globally with the rest of the world. So if you look at the US, it'd be like JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citicorp, right? We're not talking about a medium sized bank, let's say in Kansas City, Kansas, okay? Now, the reason that this is important is because of the restrictions we put on to the Russian, the Chinese then went to smaller banks to start making payments on SWIFT between the Russians and the Chinese, all right? And so you can imagine what happens. If you were in the US and you were at, let's say Flagler Savings and Loan, and you wanted to transfer money to Europe, there's probably a corresponding relationship with Flagler with either JP Morgan, Citicorp, or whatever, and they would execute the trade for you, okay? So what the Chinese said was, let's have Flagler go set up the trades themselves. So once we see the volume of trading through the money, we were going to sanction the smaller banks, okay? Because they're breaking our sanction rules. But as you can see here on this page, we decided against it. And the reason we decided against it wasn't that we didn't want to do it. We were afraid to do it because we were afraid what the Chinese were going to do with their dollars. And guess what? Everyone knows we're trying to raise $9 trillion this year. We still have maybe 2 to 3 trillion to go, and we didn't want to mess that up. So in other words, we're all in the same system. We don't have absolute impunity to do what we want. And here's the perfect example. So where from here? Well, look what they say here. Despite the current events, right? The global central bankers indicate that through 2026, net demand for global central banks for dollar assets will be more pervasive than the demand for the euro, renminbi, yen, and pound assets combined. Okay? In other words, the free trading currencies in the world, okay, we are going to basically dominate this space. Now, within the Chinese government, there are different views, two main views. One view is they want to kind of promote the euro as a different than the dollar for them to go into, but the other half of the Chinese government doesn't believe that's possible. Anybody who follows me, you realize that I don't think that's possible either. And even more interestingly, the Chinese have been openly talking about moving more into the yen and more into the euro. And guess what? The Japanese and the European don't want them to do that. They don't need trillions of dollars going into their currency, especially the yen, all right? So they don't want that at all. So we're kind of stuck. So all this talk about de-dollarization, and it's going to be the BRICS, it's going to be gold, it's going to be crypto, it's going to be something like that. Basically, it doesn't matter because the countries of the world are not upset over the dollar. They're upset over SWIFT. There's a big difference. It just is that SWIFT is dominated in dollars. So it kind of the dollar is not a bad currency according to the world, all right? But SWIFT, they don't like it all. So what do you think? Like and follow, and certainly comment all you want.